This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and a warm welcome to Global Business coming to you live from Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's begin with a look at the markets. The JSE pushed higher in broad-based gains today. The all-share gained 0.59% ahead of President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address Thursday, which may provide further details on how the government plans to rein in expenditure while also stimulating economic growth. Coming up on the show tonight. Teachers in Zimbabwe continue with their strike as the main opposition dismisses President Mnangagwa's call for talks. Key witness in South Africa's corruption inquiry is arrested. And UK Prime Minister now heads to Brussels after talks with Ireland leaders. Teachers in Zimbabwe are currently on a nationwide strike after last-minute negotiations with government broke down. According to the trade unions, teachers will only go back to work once the government has met their demands. Some teachers are reported to have gone back to work, citing intimidation from security forces and fear of losing their jobs. Media reports indicate Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front Party activists have set up camps in schools in what teachers deem as acts of menace. The main opposition party has termed President Emmerson Mnangagwa's call to discuss a framework for national dialogue as an insincere approach. Protests in the country broke out on January 14th following the steep increase in fuel prices that turned into violent clashes. Let's discuss this further with CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya, who's live for us in Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Farai, President Mnangagwa has invited presidential candidates in last year's poll for a meeting to discuss a framework for post-election dialogue. Why is the main opposition opposed to that meeting?
Well, Peninah, the main opposition MDC alliance believes that this negotiation process, this dialogue process, must be brokered by an independent, impartial convener and not President Emmerson Mnangagwa himself, who has called the dialogue. And so that's why the main opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, has snubbed this meeting. He described it as just merely a photo opportunity. So he believes that someone else, perhaps SADC or some other international group, should be convening and mediating this dialogue. However, 12 out of the 22 invited political parties have turned up for that meeting with the president. And when I was at State House earlier, I spoke to some of the leaders who welcomed this as a good first step. They say that dialogue is the only way forward, not the best, but the only way forward for Zimbabwe. And so that is the confidence that they have in this process and the belief that they have in this process. This is just the initial meeting. Many more are planned. And so hopefully the MDC Alliance and other political parties will be part of this process and hopefully come up with a resolution that will see Zimbabwe get back on its feet.
So what is likely to take center stage at these talks if and when they take place?
Well, Peninah, certainly the economy, I think, will be top of the agenda, and in particular, some of the very pressing and immediate challenges that Zimbabweans are having to contend with on a day-to-day basis. Shortages of cash, which have been very long-running, shortages of basic commodities like bread, for instance, and just the rising cost of living, trying to make sure that Zimbabweans can afford to have a decent life, have access to decent services, provision of medical services, sanitation, and those sort of things, education, amongst others. So those issues of the economy and getting it back on track, getting it on a recovery path are likely to be top of the agenda. But I also expect that the political and security environment will also be, discussed here. In particular, in view of the events that we've seen here over the last couple of weeks, where there have been violent protests, where there's been a crackdown by the security sector, I think these political leaders will also want to ensure that we don't have a repeat of that violence, of the loss of lives, and a response that will perhaps infringe on some of the freedoms of the political party. So, Peninah, I think those are the issues. But I think also, this meeting today was convened by the National Reconciliation Commission. Now, what is also required, and what is very clear to many Zimbabweans, is that Zimbabweans are polarized. They are divided on partisan lines. So there will be a process that is required to heal Zimbabweans, to reconcile them, to get them to realize that this is one country, united as a country, Zimbabweans stand. But if they're divided, they will fall.
And what's the update on the teacher strike? Is there a likelihood of a deal in the near future?
Well, certainly the strike continues, and when you speak to the leaders of the two trade unions that are leading this, they are adamant that teachers are not turning up for work. Those that are turning up for work aren't doing any meaningful teaching. And certainly, we spoke to some colleagues in the media who visited some schools where teachers had purely gone to school to clock in and register that they had attended, but weren't teaching. And we certainly saw that as well at one school that we visited yesterday, where a number of teachers had come but weren't conducting any lessons, and we're likely to see this continue. In terms of resolution, I think obviously government and all stakeholders want to see a quick resolution. The school term is going on, and the longer that this takes, the more children will be compromised, and the quality of education will be compromised. So a resolution, a quick one, will be required. However, I think it's very unlikely that government will accommodate the demands by the teachers. They've made an offer so far. They may try to improve it somewhat, but government simply can't afford to offer more than it has already, or to pay salaries in US dollars, which is what teachers are demanding. What is likely to happen, in my view, is that there might be some sort of arrangement where non-monetary packages are brought into play, things such as residential stands, things such as facilities where teachers can bring in vehicles and other goods duty-free, facilities where teachers can access seed capital to start up income-generating projects that will augment their salaries. I think those are the sort of arrangement that we're likely to see going forward, because, as I said, government simply can't afford to meet the demands financially that the teachers are looking for.
All right, Farai, thank you for that update. Farai Mokutuya live in Harare. On to South Africa, and two data points have been released in the last couple of days. The survey points to an economy searching for positive news and policy direction. Here's Angela Kuppler reporting more on that story.
The first data point is the Saki Business Confidence Index, which moved sideways between December and January. Compared to January 2018, however, the BCI was 4.6 index points down from that exceptional level of 99.7 in January 2018.
I think it's a very realistic figure in the sense that we're more aware of the challenges, and we are aware what we must do to actually try and address some of these challenges. And then, of course, corruption and maladministration also came to the fore very strongly in January. So apart from actually economic structurally adjusting the economy, it's also about get the economy and the administration back on track.
Then there's the ABSA Purchasing Managers Index, which edged down slightly but remains above the 2018 average, suggesting the sector started the year on a fairly strong footing, despite a drop in production momentum from Q4 of 2018.
Although we're seeing weak activity levels right now, manufacturers are upbeat about near-term prospects in South Africa. And I think what they seem to be looking for is that there may be clearer policy action, perhaps.
The national budget to be presented by the country's finance minister could provide some clues.
The upcoming budget must put it very straight where we're going. I think it's not only about policy certainty, it's also the direction of which policy is taking.
Economic growth prospects will, however, remain muted.
We're only expecting GDP growth of about 1.7%, but it's pretty clear that a lot is going to rest on the policy settings that emerge after the elections around May.
The data suggests that there's still little opportunity for significant growth in the South African economy. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia hosted the event Tasdir Plus Export. The project aims to diversify export markets, support value chains to access foreign markets, and encourage commercial establishment abroad. Boosting exports to Africa is one of the main goals of the initiative. Here's Ahmed Shawashi with more on that story.
The Tunisian Confederation of Industry, Trade and Handicrafts, UTICA, held a study day to assess the situation of exporting companies involved in the Tasdir Plus or Export Plus project.
Just 15 international trading companies are benefiting from the Tasdir Plus Export Support Program. Thus, we seek to target more trading companies to bring this number to 50 or even 70.
Officials noted that the number of trading companies in Tunisia amounted to 4,000, adding that they had totaled in 2016 a global turnover of about $1 billion, including 333 million on the African market.
These companies have a particular focus on African market, and exploration missions are scheduled in 2019 in Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Djibouti, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Benin and Nigeria.
Experts at the Chamber of International Trading Companies revealed that out of the 4,000 trading companies present in Tunisia, only 800 are active today.
The company's contribution to total exports, excluding energy, was 10.6% in 2016. This rate is around 80% in the African market. We can go much further and boost export to Africa and the world if more advantage is given to us, and if the problems of logistics is solved and the obstacles to financing are mitigated.
According to the Tunisian Confederation of Industry and Handicrafts, 331 companies have so far benefited from the Export Plus program. The objective of 2019 is to attract 300 new companies. The World Bank funded Tasdir Plus or Export Plus program, launched over a 5-year period, 2015 to 2020, and with a global budget of about $19.4 million, aims to support over 600 companies active in goods and services. Authorities believe that boosting export will revive the country's economy. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Look at some corporate news now. NASPA's owned pay television operator MultiChoice says it expects its rest of Africa business to return to profit in a few years' time. The operator's non-South African unit has been steadily adding subscribers and growing revenues but remains unprofitable. In the 2018 financial year, that operation recorded a trading loss of about $343 million from about $365 million the year before. The firm says in the face of new competition from global streaming giants such as Netflix, MultiChoice is banking on local content, giving it an edge. Veteran banker Bob Diamond is stepping down as chairman of Pan-African Financial Group Atlas Mara as part of a shake-up of the company. The firm is a financial services holding company formed to undertake the acquisition of target banks in Africa. The ex-Barclays CEO, Diamond, who is a co-founder of the firm, will become a non-executive director. Atlas Mara told investors it was undertaking a review of its strategic options, including weighing the acquisition of a 35% stake in South African financial services provider Grow Capital to accelerate a move into digital banking. South African utility Eskom may be finally getting another government bailout. President Cyril Ramaphosa revealed the government will be unveiling a package of measures to shore up its finances and address its structural issues. Ramaphosa is trying to turn around the ailing company, which supplies more than 90% of South Africa's power. Eskom is buckling under a debt burden of about $31 billion following years of mismanagement. And German car maker Daimler saw its fourth quarter operating profit fall 22% as trade wars and ballooning costs for developing electric and self-driving cars hit profits at Mercedes-Benz cars. According to the corporation, the return on sales at Mercedes-Benz cars fell to 7.3% in the fourth quarter from 9.5% in the year earlier period. As a result, earnings before interest and tax dropped $3 billion in the fourth quarter, below analysts' expectations. And that's a wrap of your corporate news. You're watching Global Business. Coming up after this short break. Key witness in South Africa's corruption inquiry is arrested. And 24-hour SMS helpline to benefit students without textbooks in Tanzania.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
South African police have arrested 5 people, including a witness at a judicial inquiry into alleged influence peddling. One of the arrested is Angelo Agrizi, who was a former executive of a private company who testified on how he bribed politicians and bureaucrats to secure government contracts for his company. The 5 are charged with misappropriating about $44.5 million. The arrests are linked to contracts awarded by the Correctional Services Department to services company Busasa Operations, now known as African Global Operations. All right, so let's cross over live to Johannesburg for more details on this story. Sumitra Naidu is there for us. So very dramatic development today, Sumitra. Who were arrested today and what charges are they facing?
Yes, dramatic indeed. So Angelo Agrizi, the former Busasa executive, he was the chief operating officer at the company. His colleague Andries van Tonder, the chief financial officer at Busasa. Also Frans Foster and Carlos Bonifacio were all arrested this morning. Patrick Gillingham and Linda Mt, both from the Department of Correctional Services, all arrested on charges of corruption, bribery, money laundering, all linked to dodgy government tenders that the company secured from correctional services over the years. Most of them appeared in court today and were granted bail of $1,500 each.
So there were reports, Sumitra, that Busasa CEO Gavin Watson was not charged. Do we know why?
Well, it's still unclear at this stage, but according to the NPA, more arrests are expected soon. It was a surprise that he wasn't charged along with the others, as he was central to all of these corrupt dealings Agrizi detailed at the Zondo Commission into state capture. He's also behind that big donation, $35,000 made to the president for his election campaign in 2017. Now, it's not clear at this stage how the NPA will continue with this case, how many more people will be arrested and when. It may come in time, though.
And Sumitra, Agrizi was one of the suspects who gave shocking testimonies detailing the involvement of government officials in this scandal. So can we expect those officials as well to be arrested?
I think what's really important about this case is that finally somebody is actually being arrested. We've been hearing, lots of testimonies over the months from various different other commissions, and finally somebody is, getting that ball rolling and we're seeing some arrests. But as you say, it's right, there's a string of others in the private sector and in government that have been implicated in these allegations of fraud and corruption. Some top-level ANC members too. Now, the case of the president receiving money and his son's involvement with Bosasa is still being investigated. During Agreezy's testimony, Mining Minister Gwede Mantashe was also named as receiving money. Gwen Ramhopa, the Gauteng MEC for Health, also accused of receiving large amounts of cash from Bosasa on a regular basis. There were even a few journalists named and implicated in this case. So I think we are going to see a lot more drama unfold in the coming weeks and months, especially with the new NPA head having started in her role. The former NPA boss, as you know, and several prosecutors were also alleged to have been involved with this corruption.
Here's the thing though, Sumitra. Agreezy was a whistleblower. He gave crucial information to the police, and here he is arrested. So question is this likely to scare other potential whistleblowers from volunteering crucial information to the police?
So, you know, this is a tricky one. So we do know that in other cases, whistleblowers came forward and were not actually protected. But the NPA is now appealing to people to come forward, assuring them protection so that it can root out corruption that has been uncovered, corruption that has been going on for over a decade. Now, that has been in part responsible for the poor state of the economy. So the new NPA boss, Shamila Batoy, has strong credentials and has shown strong ethics as well. It's still early days. She's asking people to trust her. It's also important to note that Agreezy knew very well that he was implicating himself at the Zondo Commission when he decided to give testimony. The judge even asked him if he knew what he was getting himself into, and he said he was ready. So, the NPA appealing to people to come forward, to come through, and so that we can get behind all of this corruption, so the economy can get back on track, so that politicians and everybody in the private sector that have been named can be held accountable. I think what's really important here is that some people are now being arrested and being held accountable. We'll have to wait and see whether more whistleblowers will come forward. It was a real surprise when Agreezy came forward to testify.
All right, Sumitra, thank you very much for that. Sumitra Naidu live there in Johannesburg. All right, so let's head to Tanzania. And a local tech company in the East African state has created a 24-hour SMS helpline. It is expected to benefit hundreds of students in the country. What's being called the Mtabi system uses artificial intelligence and SMS technology to deliver educational content to students who cannot afford textbooks and the internet. CGTN's Daniel Kiju explains.
A 24-hour helpline that is every student's dream. Students that need educational help here can get it through Mtabi, an award-winning edutech solution created by Given Edwards.
What they do is they simply text that question the same way they would message a friend, and then Mtabi, the system, would answer them. And we have a team of teachers here who help answer those questions so students can get a personal tutor at home without having to struggle much.
Given has won the Best Social Innovation from Africa Award, and he's also received a 2018 European Youth Award. His Mtabi team is composed of educators, developers, and entrepreneurs.
Where teachers want to interchange.
After months of hard work that the developers have put into this app, the real test is when it's brought into classrooms like this one across Tanzania. Now students here are getting gripped into its function.
Only 30% of secondary students in Tanzania have access to e-learning platforms. Mtabi aims to ensure that the remaining 70% are not left out. Over 1,500 students at this school have been using Mtabi. Their teachers are happy with the results.
The whole country, that is the whole regions, is urban areas, in the rural areas, if possible, this system is supposed to be introduced to them and to be used as a tool towards the learning and teaching.
Despite the Tanzanian government having a free education policy for primary and secondary school students, the availability of teachers and learning materials is still a challenge. So Given wants to take his system nationwide.
The overall goal for us is to develop world-class secondary school students. That's the overall goal. So everything we do is to develop world-class secondary school students.
As Given sets his eyes on the upcoming global competitions, he hopes that it will bring him closer to what he believes is his life's mission. That's helping students in rural Africa to enjoy e-learning just as much as those in the cities and towns who have internet. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Rwanda has signed a $400 million deal to produce bottled gas from Lake Kivu. The lake, which lies on the border between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, discharges dense clouds of methane that scientists fear might erupt, killing those living along its shores. The project by Gasma Energy would suck gas from the lake's deep floor and bottle it for use as fuel, as well as to help prevent toxic gas from bubbling to the surface. It's also hoped that the bottled methane will also cut local reliance on wood and charcoal. The bottled gas is expected to go on sale within 2 years. Saudi Arabia has announced it will invest around $3.8 billion to enhance access to geoscience data and reduce regulatory red tape. According to Saudi authorities, the funds will be spent on making it easier to do business and improving data quality. This will reduce the risks associated with investing in new mining opportunities for gold, zinc, rare earth metals and other minerals. The government plans to jumpstart the Saudi mining sector to form part of a broader industrial strategy aimed at diversifying the economy. The move also intends on attracting private sector investments worth $426 billion over the next decade. Investments will be made through the National Industrial Development and Logistics Program. The Algerian government is planning to bring its cement exports to around $500 million by 2023. This will be based on a surplus growth of between 10 to 15 million tons of cement over the next 5 years. The North African state entered the list of cement exporters for the first time in 2017. Authorities in the country, however, have been struggling for years to raise this sector outside the country's fuel industry. Algeria's cement exports reached 1 million tons in 2018 and is expected to grow to about 2 million tons this year.
I expect that the surplus of cement in the next 5 years will reach between 10 to 15 million tons. This will increase the exports of this material to about $500 million. The exploitation of mining and mineral resources in the development of various national industries is essential, and I think that Algeria will exploit the huge manganese might of Qatar in steel. The steel industry will double from the current 6 million tons to around 16 million tons in the coming years.
This is Global Business. Coming up, UK Prime Minister heads to Brussels to salvage Brexit deal. And the EU's Competition Commission blocks the merger between rail giants Siemens and Alstom.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. there is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is after about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Let's have a look at the main stories of the day. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has hosted the leader of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi. During their talks, the two leaders explored ways and means of strengthening bilateral relations between the two countries. Trade, infrastructure, sharing skills in extractive industry were some of the issues on the agenda. Tshisekedi says his country is willing to join the East African community to deepen its economic ties with the region. Teachers in Zimbabwe are currently on a nationwide strike after last-minute negotiations with the government broke down. According to the trade unions, teachers will only go back to work once the government has met their demands. Some teachers are reported to have gone back to work, citing intimidation from security forces and fear of losing their jobs. The Sahel G5 leaders have concluded a one-day meeting in Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou. The leaders, drawn from Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger, are calling on international donors to honor their pledge to fund anti-jihadist military operations. And in Nigeria, the UN says millions of people have been affected by the Boko Haram insurgency in the Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states. The decade-long humanitarian crisis has spilled over into the Lake Chad region, where those affected are crossing the border to seek refuge and assistance. Armed extremists, and notably Boko Haram militants, are said to be behind this exodus. And that's a wrap of our top stories. Now to the latest from Brexit. British Prime Minister Theresa May has attempted to break the deadlock over Brexit by thrashing out alternative proposals for the Irish border with political parties in Northern Ireland. The UK is on a course to leave the European Union on March 29th without a deal, unless May can convince the bloc to reopen the divorce deal. The British Premier is due to meet with the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and European Council President Donald Tusk in Brussels to seek for the reopening of the withdrawal agreement. That's despite repeated statements by the EU that the Brexit deal will not be renegotiated.
Northern Ireland does not have to rely on the Irish government or the European Union to prevent a return to borders of the past. The UK government will not let that happen. I will not let that happen.
All right, let's cross over now to Kevin Osbeck live in London for more on this. Kevin, a hard 2 days for Theresa May in Northern Ireland. Has she made good enough progress?
Well, while she's been in Northern Ireland, the various political parties there are trying to pull her in different directions. You have the DUP, which most importantly holds up Theresa May's government in Westminster. The DUP is trying to get her to completely scrap that backstop in the divorce deal. But then on the other hand, you have other political parties like Sinn Féin, which has the ultimate goal of trying to reunify the island of Ireland, telling the Prime Minister that that backstop is absolutely crucial to be an insurance policy to make sure that that border always stays open. So when you're asking, has any progress been made this week? Really, the answer is no. While she was in Belfast, Prime Minister May did say she does want to have that backstop tweaked. But the big problem is she hasn't given any specifics, at least publicly, in terms of how she wants to tweak it. So what she's going to say when she's in Brussels tomorrow to the President of the European Commission and the European Council, well, right now it remains to be seen. But we do think she is going to ask them if she can formally reopen negotiations on that backstop and get it altered in some way.
Ooh, so Kevin, like you said, she is heading back to the EU tomorrow to renegotiate that deal. But given the comments we heard from the European Council's president, is there really hope for me?
Yeah, he said today, we're referring to Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, that there's a special place in hell for those Brexiteers who pushed Brexit but didn't really present a plan in order to safely get the UK out of the EU. So he is not mincing his words at all. Also very important to note that those comments from him were not off the cuff. He read those off of a sheet of paper and then later tweeted that exact phrase as well, or something very similar to it. So what can she get from Brussels tomorrow? Well, it doesn't look like much. We heard President Juncker again repeat his stance today that that withdrawal agreement that includes the backstop is not open for renegotiation. Maybe even more importantly, the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar was in Brussels today. He said that he is not up at all for having that backstop deleted from the withdrawal agreement. And he is a very important voice on this. So it looks like many of those leaders today in Brussels have again put that line in the sand. They've drawn their red lines and they're not really willing to budge.
And with these hot positions, Kevin, is it definite we're now staring at a no-deal Brexit?
So it does look like we are slowly but surely inching closer to a no-deal Brexit. I just checked the Brexit countdown clock right now. We are 51 days, only 51 days to go until B-Day or Brexit Day when the UK is supposed to officially be out of the EU. I guess the big question is, as that countdown clock gets closer to day 0, is there going to be some more political pressure on both sides here, or at least one of the sides, to maybe erase or soften some of those red lines that they've drawn? Very important to note that a majority of MPs have expressed that they do not want a no-deal Brexit. Prime Minister Theresa May has said she does not want a no-deal Brexit. That's why she has been pushing her divorce plan. The EU has also said it does not want a no-deal Brexit. So most people don't want a no-deal Brexit. So the question is, well, maybe they're going to crack under some of the pressure as the B-Day gets closer and closer.
A tough 48 hours ahead for Theresa May. Kevin, thank you very much for that update. Kevin Osbeck live in London. Now, European Union authorities have rejected a massive rail merger deal between France's Alstom and Germany's Siemens. The EU Competitions Commission argued that the pact would harm competition in the transport market. The veto is likely to spur efforts by France and Germany to loosen EU competition rules to potentially allow European Union ministers to have a say. However, the EU's Antitrust Commissioner has kept her focus on European customers, saying the Franco-German merger would have created a near monopoly in the region.
Our investigation showed that the merger would significantly reduce competition in several signalling markets and for very high-speed trains. The merged company would have become by far the largest player in Europe, and in some signalling markets there would be no competition left. To be clear, it's fine to be big. That's not the issue here. But we found that competition from other suppliers would have been insufficient to replace the considerable loss of competition due to the merger.
After a 35-day government shutdown that postponed the U.S. President's State of the Union address, Donald Trump finally delivered the annual address on Capitol Hill. Nathan King has the details.
Well, I think basically it may have been his second State of the Union speech, but I think it was the longest ever in US history, going on nearly an hour and a half. A lot of domestic stuff, as you can imagine, because it's the time he reaches into people's homes who don't look at politics very much. Also, with 2 years to go until the next presidential election, let's face it, this is kind of his kickoff for his second term, or running for his second term. But when it comes to foreign policy, he did make headlines. In fact, the big headline was over in the nuclear sphere. He basically said that he would meet DPRK leader Kim Jong-un for a second summit.
Much work remains to be done, but my relationship with Kim Jong-un is a good one. Chairman Kim and I will meet again on February 27th and 28th in Vietnam.
We were led to believe that maybe we're going to get some sort of announcement about a meeting between US President Trump and President Xi Jinping. We did not get that. On other nuclear areas also, the US pullout of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, he basically said he would like another deal, perhaps including China, but, and this is a big but, if there wasn't another treaty, he would basically advocate an arms race in this area. He also mentioned China trade. Let's take a listen to sort of optimistic President Trump.
I have great respect for President Xi, and we are now working on a new trade deal with China. But it must include real structural change to end unfair trade practices, reduce our chronic trade deficit, and protect American jobs.
The applause there. Now we'll see how much those words mean, of course, when the US negotiating team goes back to Beijing after Lunar New Year. As you know, last week, Yu He, the Vice Premier, and his team were here in Washington.
To mark the Year of the Pig, American retailers are rolling out their Lunar New Year items featuring the pig, a symbol of good fortune and abundance. But at the same time, merchants in New York's Chinatown are having trouble getting their items in store on time. Here's CGTN's Peninah Karibe with more from the Big Apple.
U.S. department store Macy's kicked off its Lunar New Year celebration at its flagship store in New York. The highlight was a lion dance meant to attract good luck and fortune. It's the 6th year Macy's has marked the holiday.
Diversity and inclusion is one of Macy's core values, and we're very committed to continue to grow that internally and with our customers. And it's just a fun way to celebrate such a great occasion.
There was the usual gold and red, but there was also plenty of merchandise for those seeking a more literal interpretation of the Year of the Pig. Donna Karan featured sweaters and t-shirts with bright-eyed piglets, and Coach was offering an $150 red tote with a pig surrounded by cacti. In the cosmetics department, Kiehl's had a pig-themed facial cream and toner. Elsewhere, other global brands have rolled out their pig merchandise. Gucci has taken inspiration from the children's fable Three Little Pigs. Estee Lauder has a $200 pressed powder compact. With Peppa Pig celebrates Chinese New Year about to hit the big screen in China, Peppa Pig merchandise is a hot gift for kids over the holidays.
For those looking for something a little more authentic and at a lower price point that looks good in the home, there's no better place to shop during Lunar New Year than New York's Chinatown.
It's where many people get their decorations, firecrackers, and food.
Lunar New Year is when we have the biggest draw and we count on the biggest sale.
While demand is strong, Chen says this year there has been a problem with supply. Many merchants put in their orders ahead of time on concerns some of the items could be hit in the trade war. That caused a backlog at the border. Then the government shutdown happened, causing further delays.
It is a trickle down, I guess, clearing through customs, and it's nerve-wracking because, you know, this is like Christmas items, and after that, they basically have to be thrown out.
Festive supplies may be scarcer than usual this year, but there is no shortage of enthusiasm to celebrate the biggest Chinese holiday of the year. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, New York.
MasterCard says that 2018 was an especially good year for U.S. department stores online. even as on-site sales dipped again. Still, analysts are confident that America's brick-and-mortar outlets can survive if they are willing to adapt. CGTN's William Denslow reports.
It's an industry on the move, and retailers are trying to keep up.
So when you click on this, you can change sizes, so that way you can really find what's going to work for you.
Tech startup Perfectly aims to give customers confidence when buying clothes on the web. By creating an online avatar, the goal is to see how an item of clothing fits without actually trying it on. Technology like this could be another blow to traditional brick-and-mortar retailers.
People who are adapting to new technologies, people who are thinking about the storefront almost as a showroom, they've got a leg up in this new realm.
More than a dozen retailers in the US filed for bankruptcy protection last year. And department store sales slipped again, down 1.3% during the 2018 holiday season. But there are signs online sales are picking up the slack. According to MasterCard, e-commerce sales for the same department stores rose 10.2% in the lead up to Christmas.
What we saw over the holiday season when it comes to buy online, pick up at store, and that growth in that area is where we're going to see a lot more retailers wanting to invest in.
While e-commerce provides a challenge for retailers, analysts at this retail expo say technology doesn't need to be in competition with traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Some companies here are working to improve the brick-and-mortar retail experience. Opticon hope to bring tap-and-go shopping to the mass market. By avoiding the checkout, the aim is to save customers time and save retailers money. But blending technology and traditional retail sales can be easier said than done. Meg Kinney first opened a store in New York 25 years ago and now has 6 in the city. Her digital business has grown 25% each year over the past 3 years, but only a quarter of her sales are online.
In regard to getting eyeballs to my digital presence, I'm trying to figure out how to be visible in a sea of many, many people.
Analysts believe the gap between e-commerce and traditional retail is getting smaller. They say that blending the two is the most effective way to stay in style. William Denslow, CGTN, New York.
Let's go through commodity prices, and all edged higher for the first time in 3 sessions today. Although concerns over the outlook for the global economy capped gains, gold held steady after US President Donald Trump, in his State of the Union speech, vowed to build a border wall but gave little clarity over developments in the ongoing trade discussions with China. Still ahead on Global Business. Young entrepreneur cashes in on turning old drums to fine pieces of furniture.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
For decades, scientists working here have unearthed the remains of ancient man buried deep underground. But that's not all there is to Kenya's Turkana County. From February 5th, join CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa for our 6-episode series as she explores the cradle of mankind.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
In Senegal, a young man is changing the craftsmanship of the furniture-making industry by making use of oil drums. The result of his know-how is impressive. Here are more details on that story.
Furniture making is a craft that involves various skills and innovation. An ambitious and passionate young man is seeking to revolutionize this industry with a new look by using metals as raw materials. Baba Kathayim makes furnishings such as dining tables, cabinets and even living room furniture at his workshop located in Yoflayen. To achieve the highly conventional product, he transforms metal and practices the art of upholstery. But where does this inspiration come from?
It all started in 2007. I was cutting a barrel to make a manger for sheep. Suddenly, I was inspired and I went to do it. I made my first furniture. They were not so good, nobody was interested. I tried again. On the third attempt, I accomplished the feat. In 2008, I started to make furniture in my workshop and I displayed them at the entrance under the constant gaze of passers-by, also on social networks. Since then, orders abound. Per day, I can make up to 5 living rooms plus an extra day for finishing.
Each week, Babaka invents new models for his clients, most of whom are attracted by the originality of the concept he uses to create the products. However, the prices may vary from between $200 and $500 US.
I was looking for something special. I came across some post of some creation made by Boubacar. Immediately, I was seduced because it's a Senegalese who shows that innovation and creativity have no limit. The art of using recycled oil drums helps preserve the environment and makes these drums strong and durable. In terms of cost, it's more accessible, more affordable than buying imported furniture.
The dedication displayed by Babaka and his desire for perfection is a reflection of the beauty of his furniture. To meet the strong demand of his growing customers, Babaka hopes to one day put his concept on a larger market by building his own empire. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Fishing is a skill that has been handed through generations of members of Kenya's Turkana community who live around Lake Turkana. In recent years, however, several challenges have emerged eating into the fishermen's livelihood. Here's CGTN's Wilkis Nyabwa with the second part of the gripping tales of Treasures Turkana.
The sun is peeping over the horizon when the fishermen set out. Early mornings are the best times for fishing expeditions. The Lake Turkana is peaceful then, and the nets the fishermen cast the previous evening are heavy with fish. But not all the fishermen who fish in this lake are so lucky. On one side of the Lake Turkana in Kalokol, fishermen take stock of the morning's catch. Without boats, they can only fish where the water is shallow. A whole morning's work has yielded only these little fish.
Tukipata kama hii tunatoa 2, 5 watoto wanakula.
I'll give the children some to eat and sell the rest. They won't fetch more than $1.50.
But on the other side of the lake, a 7-hour journey by boat, the fishermen encounter different fortunes. They guide motorboats laden with fish back to the store at the shore. For a small fee, the Fishermen Cooperative Society of Loyangalani provides freezers to store the fresh fish and stores to keep the dried ones. It also helps to find buyers. Fishing is a skill that has been handed down through generations among the Turkana people.
The sea is a farm from where we reap. It's a source of our livelihood.
But in recent years, even for fishermen with boats, it has become harder to make a decent living from fishing in Lake Turkana. One of the challenges that fishermen in Lake Turkana continue to face is stormy weather when they must remain on shore for their own safety. But on days like this, when the lake is relatively calm, then they can venture out to earn their living.
Formerly, they were using sailing boats. Now they have, most of them have motorized boats. So it was a challenge because they don't get their fish on time here because of this wind again.
Fishermen without boats are also often at risk of being attacked by crocodiles or the Ethiopians who often cross over to the Kenyan side. And once they secure their catch, the fishermen must find a market. The fresh fish is more popular than the sun-dried variety.
This piece of fish, they get them very low, maybe 20 shillings or less. But when we buy them fresh, when we start fresh, one piece gets 100 shillings. So it's like a 100% profit to them. So we encourage them later on to bring all fish fresh.
Some of this fish will make it to the capital, Nairobi, where it will be sold at a much higher price. The profits won't trickle down to the hundreds of fishermen who venture out to the lake every day, but they are hopeful. The county government of Turkana has pledged to donate fishing boats. There are also plans to partner with other organizations to export fresh fish to other countries. It is such incentives that keep the fishermen of Turkana on the lake day after day, hoping to reap big. Bulletin, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
South Africa's Department of Arts and Culture has recently hosted the inaugural South African Film Summit at the Carlton Centre in Johannesburg. The event focused on transforming and innovating South Africa's film industry. CGTN's Angelo Coppola was there for us. Take a look.
Policymakers, funders and filmmakers were on hand to look at the sector and find solutions to expanding it and clearing any bottlenecks. Government is keen on partnerships, not only with the private sector, but also with other government departments.
Sometimes some people would be funded by more than one funder on more or less a similar project. And you ask yourself, why is it that we've not been able to work? We have to work. And I think that there's been a lot of investment in the industry. Maybe before talking about more, let's look at the kitty we have.
Film producers in South Africa are caught between a rock and a hard place at the moment when it comes to content buyer Mnet in terms of allocated budgets. There's also another pressing issue, intellectual property.
Our broadcasters now need to understand that people need to have ownership of their IP. It doesn't make sense. You've got a crappy budget and you also don't own your IP. So something has to be revisited and we need to create a win-win situation.
Another challenge facing the film industry is distribution once the body of work has been completed.
And I think the partnerships with BRICS and all the nations is also a very important component because we have this arrangement and it's a great audience that we have potential to mine.
The South African film industry has come a long way in a relatively short space of time.
I think the potential of where we are continues to grow. I mean, 20 years ago we had no industry of any note. We were making 3 or 4 movies a year.